This is Democracy Watch. Mark, the RNC has effectively just declared war on students, on young people in one of the closest swing states in the entire country, one that may very well decide the election in November. What just happened here?
Okay, this is at some level nuts. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. The Republican National Committee has sued the State Board of Elections in North Carolina because they have allowed the state flagship university, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is a state-run university. It is their flagship university, has approved that school's electronic IDs to be used for voting. Now, the reason why I say this is nuts is because North Carolina already has some of the strictest voter ID laws in the country. Okay, North Carolina already requires very, very strict voter ID as a result of Republican legislation. To tell you how strict they have made this ID requirement, neighboring Duke University, a private university, had to create a second form of ID, not their normal student ID, a second form of ID in order for their students to use. But the University of North Carolina, because they're a state flagship university, said, you know what, we're going to have our digital IDs, our electronic IDs, be the ID that we use, that we give students and faculty, and they should be able to use them to vote. And the state board said yes. And now the Republican Party is challenging that, saying that they shouldn't be able to use those digital IDs.
Mark, what was the rationale for the RNC to actually wage this lawsuit against the university?
Okay, get this. They argued two things. Number one, they say that they are afraid that people will fake their electronic student IDs. I mean, let's just pause for a moment and say, oh my God, there has never been a student who's faked an ID when there were not digital IDs. But set that aside. They believe that people will fake the digital IDs by taking photocopies of an ID, photoshopping them, taking a picture, and then putting them on their phones. I think that the people who filed this lawsuit they're not like really current with technology, because I think they think digital IDs are just like a photograph on a phone.
Yeah.
Like not that it's like a digitally, stamped and native product.
Let's see one of those kids try to do a fake digital ID and go through TSA and see if that works.
Right, exactly. With a photo, right?
And also, these are students. Imagine going through all of this trouble to fake an ID to go vote. We should be so lucky that they're that desperate to go vote. You know?
The second thing is they say that foreign students will infiltrate this ID system and will use it to vote. Now, here are the problems with that. Okay, set aside the technological problems. This is to vote. It's not to register to vote. You already had to show ID to register to vote, right? Yeah. So all of these people who they are imagining are faking IDs or are foreign, they are already on the voter rolls because they've already shown they've already shown an ID to register to vote.
Right.
This is just to actually show up at the polls and have the poll worker say, yeah, that's you. That's the same person as I see in the photo. So none of this makes any sense. I mean, none of this makes any sense. And so it is clearly just a pretext that the Republicans have in order to make it harder for students to be able to vote at the University of North Carolina.
Right, knowing full well that they're more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans. Mark, what is the remedy if a student ID was a valid form of ID, but then through no fault of their own, the school changed to digital IDs? You can't just disenfranchise thousands of students, can you?
I mean, no, you can't. And that's the reason why they're going to lose this lawsuit. The Democratic Party has intervened to defend this case. My law firm and I, we've intervened on behalf of a student group at UNC to defend this case. And so, no, I don't think this lawsuit's going to prevail. I think, Brian, the way to think about this lawsuit in all seriousness is, we didn't see the Republican Party filing a lot of litigation in North Carolina until after Kamala Harris became the nominee. And since Kamala Harris became the nominee, there has been kind of a helter-skelter, seems very panicky kind of approach Republicans are taking to litigation in North Carolina. And so, I wonder if the two are not connected. That essentially, Kamala Harris became the nominee, her poll numbers were vastly better in North Carolina than Joe Biden's were. And of course, if Donald Trump doesn't win North Carolina, he's done for, right? This is like a must-win state. And so they are just at this point back on their heels. And just like Donald Trump's messaging against Kamala Harris seems to be kind of here, there, and everywhere, and not really have a reason or rhyme, I kind of wonder if this lawsuit and some of the others we see in North Carolina is just born out of desperation.
Well, I think we're not giving Trump enough credit for his brilliant messaging about how migrants are eating pet dogs and cats and how Kamala Harris isn't black. I want to give him a little bit of credit here for what he's for his well thought out attacks against Kamala Harris.
I do have to give J.D. Vance credit, because it is rare that a home state senator decides to demonize and then cause the shutdown and evacuation of things in
his own state. Constituents. Yeah. Really brilliant stuff.
But he did say, as I recall, not to digress too far, but didn't he say that he was making up stories?
He admitted that he had created the story, but sometimes you just got to lie to get what you want, Yeah. And that's usually something you don't say on national television.
When you're trying to run a winning campaign, these are all things are not typical.
That's right. You did mention that your firm had intervened on behalf of the students in North Carolina. Obviously, hugely important for your team to do that. I think for those of us watching, a small way that we can show our appreciation for the work that Mark and his team are doing right now in North Carolina and across the country is to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, how do you reconcile the fact that student IDs from a state school in North Carolina are indeed valid forms of ID with the concern that electronic IDs may pose other problems?
Right. And that's why this is so stupidly pretextual. I mean, let's be honest. Students have physical IDs. And, they use them to purchase things on campus. They use them, to get into buildings, to card swipe, to get into buildings. And the same is true of their electronic IDs. And the electronic IDs are no more or less secure than the physical IDs. The interesting thing here is, like I said, the only university in the entire state of North Carolina that has gone through the trouble of creating a digital ID that they could then submit to the state and have it count for voting was the flagship university. If this was Duke University, I'd understand, okay, they don't like Duke students. Duke students are mostly from out of state. It's a private university. But this is a real slap in the face to their home state. The fact that the Republicans are attacking the University of North Carolina for their student ID and their student body really just shows how desperate they are. Because as you point out, this doesn't make any sense between the physical IDs and the digital IDs.
To what extent do you think that Republicans' embrace of someone like Mark Robinson, who is running for governor, has led to the polling deficit that we're seeing right now for Republicans?
Oh, I mean, there's no question. I mean, Mark Robinson is a historically terrible candidate. I mean, it is possible that even in a state that, we oftentimes talk about being kind of like a 50-50 state, when we talk about Republican gerrymandering, we're like, look at the control of the legislature and what's a 50-50 state. It's entirely possible that at the end of this election, you're going to have Josh Stein win by near double digits, and you could have Kamala Harris win by a couple of points. And a lot of this is the hangover from that governor's race, because Mark Robinson has said some absolutely incredibly terrible things. I mean, there are times when I listen to J.D. Vance and I think, if they were going to replace J.D. Vance, they wouldn't replace him with RFK, they'd replace him with Mark Robinson. He'd fit right in. Or at least, he is probably more of an heir to Trumpism than anyone else. And so, I think it's dragging down the entire ticket.
You claiming that Mark Robinson is a historically bad candidate is a real slap in the face to Carrie Lake out there.
Look, I mean, let's be honest. I think there's a really good argument that Mark Robinson's going to lose by a much, much wider margin than Carrie Lake lost or will lose. I mean, Ruben Gallego is going to win that Senate race in Arizona. But, if would it surprise you if Mark Robinson lost by 10 points or 12 points?
No.
It wouldn't surprise me.
No.
I mean, he's just like so outside the mainstream of anything.
And by the way, this is to Republicans' own detriment, because they've already seen what happens when they get these wildly far-right lunatic candidates like they did with Don Bolduc, Doug Mastriano, Kari Lake, Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker. Those people underperformed even the other Republicans on the ballots across the country. And yet they've learned no lesson, which is a pattern that we're seeing right now, is not learning these lessons. This whole election denialism that's taken over the Republican Party, where they refuse to acknowledge objective reality, has robbed them of the ability to see their mistakes and learn from them moving forward. And that's why we have Donald Trump again engaging in the same practices, again falling behind in the polling, and these other candidates, these other Trumpist candidates who are doing the exact same thing as Donald Trump did, and none of them learned the lesson because they robbed themselves of the ability to do that by engaging in election denialism every time they lose.
Right, and far be it from me to defend the likes of Herschel Walker or Dr. Oz or Kari Lake or any of the others, but the Republicans there could at least say, well, we didn't know how terrible they were.
Right.
Right. I mean, like Mark Robinson. I mean, you've been talking about Mark. I mean, Mark Robinson didn't sneak up on the Republican Party in North Carolina. His incendiary and outlandish claims were well known before they chose him as their nominee.
Let's finish off with this real quick. When will we have some type of resolution on what's happening in North Carolina?
So look, I think, every day that goes by, we are one day closer to the election, and we are at the point where people are going to start to vote early soon. So I expect the courts will handle this case very quickly. I would not be surprised if we had a ruling by the end of this month.
Okay. Well, of course, for those watching, Mark and I will bring that to you as soon as we do have some type of resolution on this case, as well as the other cases that are happening across the country right now. Again, to support the work that Mark and his team are doing, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.